And we're live once again with the MongoDB podcast live. My goodness, we're having all sorts of challenges today. The internet dropped right at the top of the hour, giving us a little bit more of a challenge to deal with. But I'm so excited to welcome you all to the MongoDB podcast live. This will be my last MongoDB podcast live for a while. I'll be transitioning to a new role, so I'm really excited to go out with a bang. I've got some really special guests. A former colleague of mine has gone off and started a company with her partner, and I'm really excited to introduce you to this amazing product space. The product is called Multiplayer, and I'm not going to waste any time. We're going to get right to it. We're going to introduce Steph Johnson and Tom Johnson. Welcome to the show. It's great to have you on the podcast.
It's great to be here.
Only a little bit weird to be on the other side of the screen.
Yeah. So you were at MongoDB for quite a while.
Sure was. And I was the gal who had to watch the comments and make sure we chucked the inappropriate stuff. So fingers crossed, it doesn't happen to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, fingers crossed. We have had challenges, though. The internet dropped right at the top of the hour for me anyway. I guess Comcast is doing their best to keep me on my toes. But Tom, welcome. We've met a couple of times in leading up to this podcast, but why don't you introduce yourself first to the audience? Let folks know who you are and what you do.
Sure. So I'm Tom Johnson, co-founder and CTO of Multiplayer. My background is in software development for 25 plus years, mainly as a backend software development developer. Though I got my start in machine learning and speech recognition in the early days. But most of my career has been wrestling with distributed systems and trying to help companies scale their products.
Fantastic. And that's the space that we're in today. We're going to talk about Multiplayer. Steph, you left MongoDB and you started this thing with Tom. How did that happen?
Interesting. Yeah, I left MongoDB in 2022. And was figuring out what I wanted to do next. And at that moment in time, the week that I gave notice, I said to Thomas, you know what, we're fortunate. I've got a few months before I figure out what I need to do next from a financial standpoint. And then the market promptly dropped. And I was like, I've got about a week. No, just kidding. But yes, we had a truncated time frame, and I was weighing a bunch of different opportunities. And I thought, working at MongoDB, especially reporting to Dave for much of the time, I felt like I got a pre-MBA. And also running the comms team, I feel like there are things, I saw things. And I just experienced so much of the things that happen at companies when you're experiencing bonkers growth and at an engineering-led org. So I wanted to do it for myself. And Thomas is wow. Thomas always has a lot of interesting projects. When he said, how about you go in on one of mine? I asked, is it the painting machine or the robots? He's got a lot cooking. And he said, no, it's the developer platform, which you're eminently qualified to represent. And I thought, I kind of am. So we decided to fundraise and bring it to life together.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on the, is that a seed round?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. Well, fantastic. And really, I mean, it's an amazing thing. So let's let folks know a little bit more about Multiplayer. Tom, what problems does Multiplayer solve for developers?
Sure. So, as a back-end software developer, working on a number of projects with big companies, small companies, one of the pain points I kept coming across is that there was never really a great, accurate system architecture documentation, from the logical platform down to all the components, the dependencies and all the APIs. It was always in somebody's head or just read the code. And, you end up, when you're working on distributed systems, having to talk about these things a lot, communicate about these things, change things. And it just becomes really complex to work quickly, release new features quickly without an accurate understanding of what you're changing and what you have. So, I started Multiplayer with Steph with the goal of putting a sort of a real-time collaborative multi-user, multiplayer, small m tool together that brings together all of these things that you have to work on a daily basis. And also to give you extra features, like to be able to show diffs and changes on your system architecture diagram for the new feature that you're developing, because you have to talk about that all the time. Yeah. So putting these bells and whistles into one tool is one of the goals we have with multiplayer.
Yeah, I was saying before we went live, I really wish I had access to a tool like this when I was a back-end developer at Merrill Lynch. What we did commonly, I mean, my job was to do really great architecture diagrams and then challenge the team to put those into production. And then the minute you go into production, the diagrams, it's out of date. It's out of date. Nobody really ever goes back to those. We used to use Visio. Nobody ever goes back to those Visio diagrams and updates them. And well, maybe they're better now than when I was doing things back there, but
they're as bad. Let me just
okay.
I'll break it to you. They're as bad. And we have this sort of saying at Multiplayer. It's like, stop diagramming, start designing. And with our tool, right now you've got this connection between these visualizations and the actual stuff that you have running, the code, where the repos are, where the actual APIs are documented. And we've got a feature in development called Radar, which allows your system to, using OpenTelemetry, to auto document itself. So it takes right now it's just manual work, whether you're using a diagramming tool or you're using, coding OpenAPI directly or something like that. It's a lot of working manually. So you have errors, you have everything's behind, that kind of stuff. So with Radar, you're going to be able to just see things documented without doing any work, and take that grunt work off of your plate and know it's your system's, source. Your system is the source of truth. What's running in production is your source of truth about your system architecture, your APIs, all of that stuff. So we take from the system that and analyze OpenTelemetry in a different way, and allow you to auto document your system, and then be able to work on it.
So that's the interesting part to me. So network tap, in packet inspection, I can pretty much figure out what's happening on the network and what tools are in place that are touching each of these packets. But then how do you go the other way, Tom? How do you document and then implement change through the tool?
That's a great question. So, first you have to start with a source of truth that's accurate. And so using OpenTelemetry, and later on we'll use eBPF and do very, very low level packet sniffing and things. So whatever way we can connect to the system and get this data, we will. That is your source of truth. Now we put it in a place that lets you work on it. So with our platform, we have this notion of branches where you can, if you're designing a new feature, saying I'm designing the AI assist feature for my product, I can create an AI assist branch in Multiplayer. I can make changes to everything: system architecture diagrams, dependencies, add new components, change environments, environment variables, all of these things. And I can go and request a design review from others, socialize the idea. It's one of the things you have to do a lot as a backend developer, is talk to people, have meetings. So we allow you to get that knowledge out of your head into the space where you don't have to have the actual meeting. You can get the which is great for distributed teams. Okay. They can give feedback, and you can see the things that you need to see as a web developer interacting with your backend development team. What are the API methods that are new for this feature that I have to know about to implement my piece? Or as the CTO, what are the suggested changes? Or tech lead, like, is this design or these new services that are being added for this feature like fit with what we want to support long term? Or DevOps, what do I need to support that's new in this new feature? So we give you this sort of safe space in Multiplayer to create a branch, make changes, and say you say ditch the feature. It doesn't change any of the source of truth documentation. It's built on top of it as changes that can be applied if you end up merging in that design into your architecture. But even better, is you may make these manual changes to the APIs you plan to develop. Okay. Now, once you deploy it with Radar, we'll check whether that's true. So if you made a mistake in some of your documentation, Radar will catch that and track it on an ongoing basis. So you don't have this issue of, using a tool that's not connected to your system like Visio or something else, or even just OpenAPI raw documentation where, manual mistakes can lead to errors. Radar will make sure and make sure that the what you have is accurate and up to date.
Yeah. So that's fascinating to me. And I'm trying to visualize where this is. First of all, I'm a very visual person. I love extending kind of this infrastructure as code to a visual interface.
Right.
And I am guilty. When I was a backend developer, I had written a system. I wrote a little daemon that ran on every machine and reported back to a database essentially. And then I put a front end on it. And one of the consultants working for me pushed a change into QA, he thought, but it went into production and it brought down some very critical machines.
Yeah.
How does multiplayer help in that respect? How do we make sure we're not pushing changes to the wrong environment?
So that's a great question. So we're on this journey as a startup, okay, where we're doing things a piece at a time. There's sort of three phases to how we're rolling out features. The first is the sort of core foundational product where you can have multiple kind of document types, platform visualizations, APIs, things like that, and make it a multi-user collaborative thing where you can edit stuff manually together and have one source of truth. Radar is the second phase, which we have in development. We're going to release into beta soon, which is now you've deployed some things, track it, make sure that source of truth is accurate, show you the diffs and changes we detect from your actual running system. So that source of truth is there, rock solid, and take the manual work out of it. The third phase is what we call Pulsar, which is going to be available in the summer. And that gets into one of the things I've always wanted to have, which is the ability to compose a platform using drag and drop and click to deploy in different environment types. So the problem you have there is how do you track somebody trying to deploy when they shouldn't? Pulsar is going to help with that. It's going to lock down the process and make it really easy to to do the things that have to do with deployment and management of your platform. And even better, it's if you're an entrepreneur starting something from scratch, or you're at a large company or starting a new project, instead of having to just jump into code and put microservices together and do a lot of hard grunt work, wouldn't it be nice to just drag and drop pre-built components, microservices, SaaS products, other things into a platform, or start from a template? We'll offer templates. And then you code the one or two microservices or change the data schema here or there to do your specific thing. But you'll be able to click to deploy in a number of different environment types that we will support. Out of the gate, we'll have AWS Kubernetes, or Fargate, some of the other cloud providers, Docker Compose. So if you can have your dev environment, your staging environment, your cheaper staging environments, and your kind of production ready clusters, but you'll deploy the same platform in any one of them. And what we do is generate all of the Terraform, the Kubernetes config, the other things that you need to have in order to do that kind of composable platform. And you don't have to be an expert to do it. So we're really excited about that, making it easy for people to actually compose a platform, deploy it, and take the hard work out of that.
Well, that sounds great. And I think you should trademark a term: infrastructure as diagram.
There you go. That's a good one.
So does it lives in the CI/CD chain? And what about people that are already using Terraform? Is there a way for you to import?
Yeah, absolutely. So we wanted this to be open. So if you think of Pulsar as a kind of PaaS solution, but not a dependency, not a closed black box, but something that's open. we have our tool that helps you visualize things, drag and drop, put dependencies together. All of those components will link to GitHub repos that have the little bits of Terraform. We'll also eventually support Pulumi and other things like that. And you'll be able to create your own. We'll have a little marketplace where you can have your own SaaS platform or your own components, where you have a little bit of that might be a little Terraform to provision it, to manage it. We'll support people developing their own environment types if they want to have a cloud provider, DigitalOcean, others that they want to support themselves. All of it will be open. Now, the idea is that it'd just be much easier to work on this within multiplayer, but I've always wanted to be able to allow developers to eject and get all of the code, and we'll be able to provide that. So if you're like, hey, multiplayer is great, but I want to go and take this over now, you'll be able to do that completely outside of multiplayer, or in a hybrid sort of like, we'll take over the DevOps side of things, but we'll do we'll still use Radar, we'll still use the the documentation, system documentation and design features, and have this hybrid approach. So we'll support those companies that might already have great DevOps stuff. They'll be able to connect it to these components that are part of multiplayer and the visualization and all of that stuff.
Well, it sounds fantastic. It sounds like the best of both worlds. Being able to design using a visual system, and then I love the term eject, and then kind of work with it from there in code. I would love to take a look. You ready to show folks what it looks like?
Yeah. So what I'll show you now is we released our beta of our first core product, I think a couple of months ago. Radar is coming soon, within weeks, and Pulsar's toward sometime in the summer. So I'll show you some of the core entities that we have, and you can imagine it building up from that. Okay, so I'll share my screen. Let's see. Okay. All right. So, can you see my screen? Yeah.
Yeah. There we go.
All right. So here's a quick peek of at a real platform from one of our design partners called Filing Ramp. They graciously allowed us to use them as a demo when we show multiplayer. They're an insurtech company with some of the largest insurance providers as customers. They provide a SaaS platform and APIs to those companies. So what I like to do is show the before and after. Okay, so you've talked about using Visio. Okay. They used diagrams.net. So the before for their platform looks a little like this. We've got, might look familiar. You've got a web app, you've got an auth service, a web API, a search service, things like that. RabbitMQ, some backend things. Lots of lines. It's hard to tell what's dependent on what. When you use a diagramming tool, it's not built for system architecture things, right? It's just diagramming. It doesn't know whether I've got a system architecture or an org chart. And let's design a feature. Just a quick one. We're going to design the AI assist. I'm going to create a microservice here. I'm going to maybe call this through my web API, and let me move this up here, and I'm going to create a dependency on OpenAI. Okay, make it nice and simple. Okay, and this is going to call that. Okay, now I've made a change to my system architecture. The only way if I sent this to somebody, nobody would know what I changed, right? I have to have a meeting. I have to go to my CTO, I have to go to my DevOps, QA, web team, maybe my peers, and say, okay, for my design, I'm going to add this, and I'm going to add that. And by the way, this gets more and more complicated. I've had to push pixels around. I've had to do a lot of hard work. I'm not an artist. Everybody struggles with this piece. So here, everybody knows the problem of using diagramming tools to do system architecture things. Now let's go to the other stuff.
Just to give an even scarier anecdote, to some of our users, even Visio is a luxury. We have one user that works for a multinational company that shall not be named. And we said, how do you keep your architecture up to date and get everybody up to speed? Everyone physically flies to a location and they roll out a giant piece of poster board that takes up the entire wall. Everyone steps up, sketches their little corner of the universe, and they roll it up and they meet again in 6 months. On the flight home, it's immediately all out of date. It's shocking. And this is a legitimate company whose name you would know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So it's always a challenge for, but this is just one piece. So now let's think about the APIs. So here is one of the public API services for filing round. Things get complicated pretty quickly in the real world. So imagine if I made a change to one of these APIs or a schema, you would not know. I'd have to have that same meeting. Now, if you went to the source, okay, you might say, just do a different change on the source, but these things get complicated. Now, this is 8,000 lines long. They're very good at we're very good at trying to manually keep things up to date. But, not many people are going to go and look at a different change from the source view. So within multiplayer, we put together, your platforms, all the components. We also bring together documents, whether it's rich text docs for requirements or sketches. We connect to your Git repositories. We have information about your environments. And so here's the same platform. Within multiplayer, we show all the dependencies, really easy to do. We've got, we've got the diagramming. We've got rich text docs. We've got information about components. APIs, everything is all together and connected. And let's say I want to, so I've created a branch for the AI assist. Let me switch to that branch. Okay, so say now I want to, I've made some changes to this. I can see just the changes. I can see the diffs. Okay, I can have custom views if I want to say with a large system, there's usually a lot of subsystems that kind of work together. It's not all one big blob of services. So I can document those things with views, and I can make the changes really pop. So if I say, okay, if I can go and understand what is being suggested from a system architecture perspective, the changes for this particular branch, and say I'm done with my design, I can go and request reviews from peers. Okay, if my CTO or my tech lead or some other people, if I'm like, okay, I'm going to make these API changes, these system architectures changes, I can ask them to come and approve it or review it. Kind of like the front end of the pull request. So rather than at the pull request time, when implementation is done, you're like, is this right? You can say up front, hey, can we discuss my design? Everything's here, and you don't have to have a meeting. Somebody requests changes or just approve. Hey, I'm just going to approve my change. Now I can go and start development and take it from there. So these are some of the big things. With everything is real-time collaborative. So if I've got, here I've logged into, a couple of different windows. Actually, let me change back to the main branch. So we're working together. So say I'm making some changes, we can collaborate just like, kind of like with Figma. So there's no lag. There's no, there's a real sense of connectedness, even if you have a distributed team across multiple time zones. Every piece of multiplayer is built for that kind of teamwork. And that's, that's a quick overview of the core feature of the product. Radar will take the manual effort out. So we've got this auto detect and auto merge mode where you can just set it up, forget it, and your platform diagram just starts showing up with all the components and all the dependencies. Your APIs show up. If you have no documentation at all, you'll get it, automatically. And then with Pulsar, imagine those components come from a marketplace or just working on the name, where you can drag and drop things that are containers, drag and drop SaaS products,
like pre-envisioned like templates. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And reusable, microservices and SaaS platforms that you just drag and drop, and all of the DevOps pieces, the Terraform to provision or configure it, just comes with it, and you can fork it and customize it. But yeah, this is the tool I've always wanted as a backend developer working with teams. So that I was lucky enough to be able to work on this. And Steph, I mean, I'm the tech guy, so I get to just focus on the tech things, and Steph's got the go-to-market experience.
Yeah. So I have a ton of questions for you, Tom, but also for Steph. I mean, what is it like to start from zero, and how do you go to 3 million in funding in such a short period of time? Like, incredible.
Yeah. Kind of an interesting story. We relied a lot on another great MongoDB alum, Graham Naray, who has a software company called Oso. Oso.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, when you're starting to fundraise, coming from a go-to-market background, I know how to read CEOs. I know how to read journalists, but VCs are a different type of humanoid. Yeah. And we would have conversations that I thought went great, and we'd never hear from them again. And then we'd have conversations where I'd be like, we totally tanked, and they're power dialing us the next day. So it was really kind of an interesting new world for us to get immersed in. Everybody says they'll introduce you to 10 people when you talk to them, and then you follow up and they don't. But Graham, man, he made a ton of intros for us. Yeah. And we pitched our story, and we connected with some, didn't connect with others. And we were lucky enough to find a really great NYC-based VC called Bowery Capital. And they're fantastic. We had like a psychological fit match. They understood what we were doing, and they dug the husband-wife team because a lot of investors, and we have not just institutional money, but also Mitch Wainer, which was one of the co-founders of DigitalOcean, and Edith Harbaugh, one of the founders of LaunchDarkly, also have money in us. And we de-risked the equation a bit because, no offense to this category of person, but we weren't two 21-year-olds that had a 6-month run together at Facebook and thought we could build a company. We had 25 years to work out our communications challenges and figure out how to get things done and be productive. So we landed on Bowery. They were our first money in. They made some intros to some other great folks, and we were off to the races. And it was the crappiest market on the planet. So we feel doubly grateful that not only did our Graham intros bear fruit, but we did it during a really challenging time. And I believe our first check wired literally New Year's Eve. So it was quite a New Year's celebration for the Johnsons. I'm like watching my Chase app while we're out to dinner. It was really great.
Yeah, I wasn't going to call it out. I didn't know if you wanted to talk about the husband-wife thing, but what's that like working together? I mean, you've obviously not worked together full time throughout your careers, but what's that like today?
I mean, we are perfectly complementary in our skills. I would not want to do a single thing on Thomas's to-do list and vice versa. So we have very naturally diverse backgrounds and experience doing different stuff. So it's kind of perfect. I think when you have two technical co-founders, you can have some smackdowns when it comes to making technical decisions and the direction of the product, for example. We have very little conflict because I do my thing, he does his thing, and there's really nothing to go to war over.
Yeah. Well, I want to dive back into the tech for just a moment. When you start working on this, there's got to be some challenges that, so when I was thinking through the logical diagram, how this works, my natural thought was I've got to write something that lives on the servers, but you're obviously doing something on the network as well. What does the implementation architecture look like? And are there any specific requirements to deploy multiplayer?
Great question. So we're multi-tenant SaaS. All of the data, metadata about platforms, dependencies, things like that lives on our side. We use MongoDB Atlas, by the way, as our backend database. We will support self-hosting and single-tenant modes in the future. If you want to, just keep your secrets. We encrypt everything. We do all the right stuff. But if you're like, I just want to have it dedicated, we'll offer that kind of solution. With what we're storing with documentation are sort of it's raw content or logical representations, virtual representations of real things. So the service box that you see in your platform diagram, it's connected to real stuff. Unlike a diagramming tool, which is just lines, this can be connected to the API that it implements on GitHub or wherever, or where the implementation is. In the folder in the mono repo you have, or the repo, in the sort of poly repo structure you have. They can also represent, real things like an integration with real SaaS products and other things. And in this first version, they sort of logically represent these things. But when Pulsar comes out, we'll actually talk to your MongoDB Atlas, configuration or some other things, and provide a special user interface for some components. So there's no deployment for the sort of manual usage of the application. For Radar, there is a little bit of change that you have to make in that we use open telemetry. So if you use APM providers at all, you're used to like adding the 3 lines of code to your, that says, okay, connect this to that, I'm using Datadog, New Relic, or maybe use Sentry or something like that. You usually have a few lines of code that you add, and then magically things just get sent to them in the right way. We're built on OpenTelemetry, so you have the 3 lines of OpenTelemetry code or some configuration. It might grow to 20 lines, but it's very small number. Set it up once, and that will send us OpenTelemetry data. Distributed traces are the things that we care about most in the first version of Radar, and that gives us information about the components, the dependencies, the API calls. We also, there's a little bit of code to schemify the contents of the payloads so we can get the schemas on our side. So we're streamed this telemetry data on an ongoing basis. So when you set it up, we have an API key when you set up Radar, and that, you deploy, and then we just get this observability data. And then we just analyze it. Once we get it, analyze it, and you're either setting it up to auto merge, where basically you can set it and forget it, and you'll start seeing like the accurate, up-to-date platform architecture, component list, APIs, because the system is sending us that. Or you can have this sort of like manual intervention mode where you can go in periodically and say, oh, what has Radar detected? It's detected these 3 new methods I forgot to, document. Let me merge that in. So the whole flow with branches and things like that, you can embrace. If you want to embrace that with Radar, you can. So we support these different modes of like set it and forget it, and always know it's tracked and updated, and tell your developers they don't have to work on that anymore, which a lot of times is like 5%, 10% of their time if you're doing anything related to system documentation or meetings related to that stuff. Or, we just make it so easy for you to have a source of truth that's accurate. That's all you'll need. And with Pulsar, it will be, it'll be a similar kind of thing. We'll support these environment types out of the box. You might have to give us a kind of API key for AWS or a cloud provider that you use, so we can, you can click to deploy on that, on those environments. But it will be, very drag and drop, no fuss, no muss, nothing to deploy, nothing to change, and you just have this visual interface for doing these really hard things, and you don't have to do the level DevOps stuff anymore.
Yeah. So many questions. So, I'm thinking about the benefit space. So it's going to be reduced downtime, greater clarity in the infrastructure, reduced overhead associated with meetings around development. What are some of the other benefits, and what's the sweet spot for developer team size?
That's a great question. So I would say that every developer spends some portion of time about system design and architecture things, whether it's actually documenting stuff in OpenAPI or updating the diagram or doing whiteboard sessions, or doing meetings about communicating, sharing the knowledge that's in the head with the rest of the people, that time is money, and that's a lot of money. Okay,
Yeah.
that's a lot of money. So that for us is what we're pitching to these companies. Say, hey, you're spending money now on these things you're doing today, and it's not that great. Nobody wants to do that. You've got these expensive developers doing this work. They shouldn't be. Let the system do it. Know that it's accurate. Some companies might skip that altogether. Now there's risk associated with that. The risk of not knowing, okay, what cost is that? It's hard to say, but you're going slower. You're probably adding technical debt and that you have to revisit later. You know, depending on your interdependencies, if you have customers that use an API or other groups that use an API that you provide, or you're just developing an app and you're trying to move quickly, there's what does it cost to be slow? So I would say those are, I mean, everybody's got pain points about this stuff. It's, you know, it's not hard for us to have the conversation. We just say, hey, what, you know, it's almost like a therapy do you have a diagram of system architecture that's up to date? Oh, let me tell you how we do that, you know. But I would say that for team size, it's, you know, it's probably, you know, if you've got some complexity to your platform, 10, 20 components, you're starting to feel the pain. Yeah, Steph, you were gonna say?
Yeah, I'll add a couple things. So CTOs, for example, we've had first calls with the CTO and the CEO, and the CTO kind of plays it cool. Oh, this sounds cool. This would be helpful. And then on the follow-up, when the CEO isn't there, they kind of lean in and say, I have no idea what's in my back-end architecture. And we're like, we knew it. So CTOs are very vulnerable because team attrition, you don't know what was in their head. Did they document? Where did they document? Is it accurate? So they're very vulnerable to changes like that. And you also have technical team leads that will have 4 people in a room in New York, and they decide that they want to build a new feature, but the DevOps guy is on vacation and the QA lady is on mat leave, and this team in Portugal is sleeping. So how do you go out and communicate that? You can instantly put everything in our tool, and you don't have to chase people to have a meeting, update them. When they come online, they can see what they need, they can do what they have to do. And it's just a huge gift for any technical team lead, whether that's a CTO or a director eng, VP eng.
Yeah. And I would say that, you know, when you think about onboarding too, I mean, getting a developer up to speed, if you don't have anything to show, I mean, think about that, how much time it takes you have to read the code, you have to develop these pictures, you have to develop these pictures in your head anyway, to have a true understanding. So, you know, we're helping with all of that kind of stuff.
Well, so you've got a massive amount of data, the way that you've described the implementation. And I can't help but think that you're focused on the front end and documentation and over time reducing maintenance costs. Are you thinking about observability and how you might expand into that space?
Yeah. So it's great to use the word data, because there are a couple of things we're going to do. I mean, I've talked about the very near term plans, but there's a lot of value in sort of putting all of this stuff together. And, you know, whether it's integrations with other tools to provide the observability in one place and put it like next to your platform to see logs, metrics, traces in a better way than just like a bunch of graphs is a good thing. Well, we probably won't try to become an APM provider. We'll integrate with tools, or even like if you drag and drop an open source project, into your platform, we'll integrate with that and be able to, you know, visualize almost like a platform dashboard. You know, but from a data perspective, I mean, one of the things we're doing is we're doing some interesting things with AI. You know, when you're on a team, there's usually one expert or a few experts, right, that know everything. You know, that have got the system architecture down, all the components, all the dependencies, what to do when this happens and this, you know, thing flashes red, and how to solve the problem, right? But that person can walk out the door with all that knowledge. So one of the values is putting this source of truth in one place is that you can have an AI assist that is the same expert, knows all the things and all the history. And that expert can be an internal tool where you're asking questions, where you'll have a chat interface where you can ask questions to your platform. You saw the filing ramp, APIs, very complex. Now, that's usually how you send APIs to people or try to understand them internally. Wouldn't it be better to just chat with your system, say, how do I log in? How do I get filings, which is one of their things? How do I do this? Show me a little code. Give me a little JavaScript. Click to try it out. Build it up. So rather than throwing, Open API and Swagger links or Postman collections or something over the fence, or try to keep your manual documentation, user documentation up to date, we'll offer that kind of stuff, even with external users too. So.
Yeah. What was your experience deploying with MongoDB Atlas? What was that like?
It was easy. One of the things I love about using Atlas is it lets us get up and running quickly and know that we can scale without having to do a lot of heavy lifting. It's let's bump up the instances. Let's change to this. Change this configuration to that. Maybe spend a little bit more money, but it's to upgrade. Obviously, nothing's for free, but it just makes it easy, and I don't have to worry about things going wrong as we make changes to our database architecture.
Yeah. You're using the database, obviously. Do you have plans to use any of the other portfolio of tools available in the Atlas platform? Like, for example, it sounds like you're looking at AI. Are you going to leverage vector encoding storage, vector search?
We're looking at that now. Yeah, we're still deciding on the lower level technology we're using, but yes, we're looking at the vector technology and some of the search features, because we're using a combination of keyword and vector search for some of the data. We're definitely looking at that.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, it's been a great discussion. The 45 minutes have flown by. What have I not asked you? What do people need to know about multiplayer?
Come and visit.
And I think, think about the size of your team, think about the market, think about attrition, think about changes, and think about not having to ever sweat that things have been documented and documented accurately. Yeah. So you're tasked with making changes to a piece of the system that you don't know well or understand. And you're completely reliant on everyone else on your team. Did they do it? Where did they put it? Are there errors in the API documentation? So taking that stress and pressure off of teams to know that that's automatically happening is great for the CTO as well as all the team members. So I think that's the most important benefit.
And I would just add that, it's our mission really to make tools for teams that work on distributed systems. So what I've talked about today is really just the start. We have other things that I didn't even mention that are really exciting. If you're a backend developer, front-end developer, QA, DevOps, CTO, if you're a team that works on distributed system, if you're a company that has a distributed system, which is basically everybody these days, we're going to be providing tools to make it easier to work on that stuff, because it's not getting any easier. It's getting more and more complex each year. So we're trying to make it easy.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, if you're looking for more information, you can visit multiplayer.app. I started to connect the dots with the startup program. How's that going? MongoDB for startups.
Oh, gosh. I mean, we're enjoying our juicy free Atlas credits for sure.
Fantastic. Oh, yeah. Great. We love that.
Thanks for that.
Yeah. Yep. If you're a startup looking to build something like multiplayer, visit the link that's on the screen. It's mongodb.com/startups. And hopefully we can help you build something great too. Tom, Steph, it's been great catching up with you. I wish you all the success in the world with multiplayer. Thanks so much for joining me on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Have a great day.
You too.